Well, that was fast. The Alliance of American Football burst onto the scene this professional football offseason with a ton of fanfare and set itself up to be a potential talent farm for the NFL, but as quickly as they began to settle in, things took a turn for the worse. Financial issues hit the league early and those appeared resolved, but recent news that the AAF will suspend all football operations shows that to not be the case. With the primary investor pulling out of the league and millions owed to vendors and players, the league is no more. While players work to figure out what they'll do next, they can take solace in knowing their spring football audition has not gone unnoticed. All 32 teams were watching the AAF, especially Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones, who was seen wearing an AAF hat in a recent interview and carried a lot of excitement regarding the league's championship game set to take place in Frisco, TX, at the Cowboys' headquarters and practice facility. While that dream is dead, the club can still benefit from the flood of talent that is now searching for a new football home. Not everyone who played in the AAF was impressive, but some truly turned the lights out on a weekly basis, in the best possible way. Ironically, many are former Cowboys. Let's take a look at who could and should get a call from America's team as the 90-man roster gets finalized over the next few weeks. McKay is definitely worth another look. Initially signed by the Indianapolis Colts in 2016, McKay has been a journeyman in his young NFL career, having also spent time with the Jacksonville Jaguars, Denver Broncos, Tennessee Titans and Chicago Bears before finally being released again in April 2018 and subsequently joining the Cowboys. That didn't exactly bode well for him, also tasked with proving himself in a room brimming with wideouts in Dallas. It was a long shot for McKay to survive deep into the summer, but he did make an impressive catch or two in training camp that showed his potential. It wasn't enough to help him survive final cutdowns though, but he delivered an impressive 375 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns on 22 catches for an AAF best 17 yards per grab in the abbreviated Commando season, warranting another look that would allow McKay to challenge for a roster spot. McKay made his presence felt in the AAF, but Johnson trumped him. A former 7th-round pick for the Green Bay Packers in 2013, Johnson has seen his fair share of the NFL, having spent time on 5 teams before being released again in 2018, this time by the New York Jets. He had a solid 2014 season with the Minnesota Vikings, reeling in 475 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns in 16 games with 2 starts, but ultimately has just 834 receiving yards and those same 2 TDs in his 3 years on an active NFL roster. Rumors of Johnson's football demise have been greatly exaggerated though, because he absolutely owned the AAF. Johnson delivered 687 receiving yards on 45 catches, 15.3 YPC, and a league-leading 5 TDs, routinely punishing defensive backs both underneath and over the top. The wideout position is one that requires the most competition in camp, and Johnson would make everyone not named Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup or Randall Cobb very nervous. The Cowboys traded a conditional late-round pick to the Green Bay Packers in 2017, helping add depth following a broken leg on Anthony Hitchens. He was also seen as insurance while Damian Wilson battled criminal charges, but those were later dismissed, and so was Elliott. More needy of depth at the defensive end position, and with Elliott having not impressed in practice, the Cowboys released him to make room for defensive end Demontre Moore, who was returning from a 2-game suspension at the time. He went on to sign a futures deal with the New Orleans Saints in 2018, but was released in the final roster cutdowns, and found himself in South Texas with the Commanders alongside McKay. Elliott led the AAF in sacks with 7.5 and added a fumble recovery for good measure. With Damian Wilson heading to the Kansas City Chiefs, and the jury's still out on if the resigned Justin March Lillard or second-year talent Chris Covington can upgrade the Sam position, Elliott could be an option to challenge for the role. You can't have enough good pass rushers. Moore has a strong upside and has played in a 4-3 scheme with the New York Giants before being signed by the Cowboys on a 2-year deal in 2017, but things never materialized for him in Dallas. A solid option to replace a then-suspended David Irving, Moore would have ample opportunity to make his presence felt. Instead, he struggled and his time with the Cowboys included a 2-game suspension, one the Cowboys were aware would land and stemmed from DUI charges from his time with the Seattle Seahawks, and ended not long after footage surfaced of an altercation that involved him in December of that year. Moore can play both the left and right defensive end positions, making him intriguing to the San Diego Fleet, and all he needed to do was prove he can remain focused and impactful. He was second to only Elliott in the AAF for sacks with 7 and had no off-the-field issues. Mission accomplished. Schultz did some major damage in his collegiate days. His 31 sacks in his last 2 seasons with Northern Iowa landed him an undrafted free agent deal with the Cleveland Browns in 2017. Things didn't end well for him there, and after garnering some interest from other NFL teams that didn't stick, he found himself in Utah looking for a chance to regain his football footing by helping lead the Salt Lake Stallions defense. His fortunes immediately turned in doing so, as Schultz became an instant star in the shortened AAF season. Standing 6 feet 3 inches and weighing in at 260 pounds, he has the right build to withstand the needs of a 3-tech and or 5-tech in a 4-3 defense, and the Cowboys wouldn't mind the added depth on a rebuilt defensive line, even with the acquisitions of Christian Covington, Kerry Hyder and Robert Quinn. Schultz tied DeMontre Moore for second most sacks in the AAF with 7, and that's enough to justify giving the 26-year-old a test drive this offseason. The 26-year-old journeyman spent time with the Cowboys in 2015 after being signed away from the Washington Redskins practice squad. At the time, the move was to replace a waived Joseph Randle, who couldn't get his act together off the field. Williams was never seen on the active 46-man game roster, and was eventually waived to make room for quarterback Kellen Moore. He then spent time with the Dolphins, Colts and Steelers before heading north to the Canadian Football League (CFL) to play for the Toronto Argonauts, and had one more stint on the Cowboys practice squad in 2017, in the wake of the controversial suspension on Ezekiel Elliott. Williams is a local product, hailing from Texas A. Another camp body option, Williams would help manage the practice workload on Elliott. He delivered 205 rushing yards on 40 attempts for the San Antonio Commanders, the third most of any halfback in the AAF with at least 40 totes. Presley is another young NFL journeyman who was in desperate need of rebuilding his football image. The 26-year-old was an undrafted free agent pickup of the Minnesota Vikings in 2016, and played for 5 different NFL teams, including the rival New York Giants in 2018, before landing with the Arizona Hotshots. That was very near home for the former New Mexico standout, where he rushed for 2,725 career yards with 35 touchdowns on 394 attempts at the college level, and delivered another 202 receiving yards to his collegiate resume. He was never able to dig in at the NFL level though, routinely relegated to practice squad duty between stints of unemployment. When the AAF came calling, he answered in a big way. Presley led the league with 431 rushing yards on 96 carries, 4.5 YPA, along with 86 receiving yards on 11 catches, 7.8 YPC. The 5 feet 10 inches, 206 pounds dual threat could be a strong interest for a Cowboys team looking for a spell back behind Ezekiel Elliott. Presley is the kind of talent that could either be summer insurance, or sneak onto the active roster and make waves in his assigned role. That's something defensive lineman Antwaun Woods can attest to. There was a point in time when Moore had a pretty solid run with the Cowboys, the team signing him in 2012 away from the New England Patriots practice squad. They needed him to step in and replace an injured Orlando Scandrick at the time, and he played in the final 5 games of that season. After being released by the club in 2013, he was resigned and wound up starting 7 games in 2014, landing at team-high 12 pass breakups along with 50 combined tackles and a forced fumble. Without Scandrick or Morris Claiborne on the field, Moore delivered. He wasn't retained though, and went on to play for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New Orleans Saints before heading to the AAF. He wasn't able to reel in an interception for the Arizona Hotshots, but did have 21 tackles with 19 of them being solo, showing his ability to end plays with no backup. I'd consider more a camp body, but one that has the added value of already being familiar with the organization. White was a sixth-round pick of the Cowboys in 2017, but never got a shot at the active roster. A talented, albeit raw, defensive back out of Florida State, there was some upside to the very physical White. It never translated at the NFL level, however, and after being released that same year and resigned to the Cowboys practice squad, he'd sign a futures deal in his sophomore year but was again a casualty in the final roster trim. He didn't land on the practice squad for the Cowboys or another NFL team thereafter, and took his talents back to Florida, to play for the Orlando Apollos. He didn't register an int, but each of his 18 tackles were solo. White knows the Cowboys and the Cowboys know White, and insurance at the cornerback will be a top priority in training camp with Byron Jones having undergone hip surgery in March. Even if Jones is ready for training camp, he won't be fully unleashed and that will free up snaps for others. There's no reason White can't be one of those guys. Say hello to Cameron Kelly. The undrafted rookie signed by the Cowboys immediately following conclusion of the 2018 NFL Draft. He was gearing up to make sure there was no immediate goodbye following that initial salutation. He already had an advantage before stepping onto the field for rookie minicamp and now OTAs, his near 6'2", 204 lb. Frame-making new passing game coordinator Chris Richard drew a bit into the collar of his polo. Richard is well known for loving length and physicality in his secondary, two attributes no one has ever accused Kelly of lacking. His athleticism included. Richard appeared to have plans for the former San Diego State star that could carve out a spot for him on the team's final 53-man roster this season. "I think he's trying to turn me into his next Richard Sherman or something," said Kelly of Richard, via the team's website. Things didn't work out last year, but Kelly's AAF leading 4 interceptions are a strong reminder that he can impact football games. Considering Kelly can flex between safety and corner, his value is that much higher than some others at the defensive back position from the now-defunct league.